Warning: you are living in a 12 milliseconds delay, and your brain is hiding it. He peeks the corner and fires before the enemy even appears. Kill cam rewinds. His bullet hits a target the viewer can't see yet. Chat screams hacks. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Early visual signals don't reach primary visual cortex for about 30 to 100 milliseconds. Your brain binds sight and sound across roughly 80 to 200 milliseconds, and your unified awareness can trail action by even more. In sprint starts, brake lights, or penalty kicks, that gap decides wins and wrecks. The twist: you can train to land decisions inside that binding window. One 15-minute drill trims reaction time this week, without guessing. The hidden lag you don't notice. To see the cheat codes, start where your delay starts. 12 milliseconds isn't one clock tick. It's a bend in a winding path from photons to feeling. Light hits cones and rods. Cones are fast and handle change in daylight. Rods are slower but sensitive in the dark. Signals ripple through bipolar, amacrine, and ganglion cells, each synapse adding micro-latency. Two highways sprint that code forward: a magnocellular stream that favors motion and onsets, and a parvitellular stream that carries detail and color. By the time activity lands in primary visual cortex, you're already about 30 to 100 milliseconds behind the event that triggered it. Now add what your brain hides from you. It doesn't deliver a single instant. It stitches a now across a window, roughly 80 to 200 milliseconds. So sight, sound, and touch feel like one moment. That's why a clap across a room looks and sounds unified, and why interfaces that violate that window feel wrong. Inside that same window, Postdiction edits what just happened using information that arrives shortly after. In the color phi illusion, two flashes at different spots feel like one moving, color-changing object. Nothing moved. Your brain wrote a smoother story. It predicts too. In the flash lag illusion, a moving object aligned with a sudden flash appears ahead of the flash. Models vary: motion extrapolation, differential latency favoring moving edges, or postdiction that blends just after data. But they all point to the same strategy. Under unavoidable delays, the brain forecasts where movers will be by the time perception is ready. When velocity is reliable, extrapolation cuts average error. When motion is noisy or broken by occlusion, the illusion shrinks because the system hedges. Meanwhile, your eyes jump 3 to 5 times a second. During each saccade, vision is actively damped for around 30 to 80 milliseconds to avoid smear. You don't notice because prediction and postdiction bridge the blackout. The cost is selective invisibility. Brief, critical transients, like a single-frame warning, can vanish if they land inside that suppression window. Action pipelines don't wait for consciousness either. In Libet-style experiments, a readiness potential, neural build-up toward movement, often ramps 335 to 550 milliseconds before people report deciding to move in self-paced actions. Interpretation is debated, but one takeaway is practical: preparation runs ahead of your story. In fast stimulus-driven tasks, the same accumulate the threshold dynamics fire quicker. If a response is partially prepared, one valid cue can tip it over inside that binding window, where it feels instantaneous. This is where we flip lag into leverage. You'll train priors, so your forecast gets sharper. You'll narrow anticipation windows, so commits launch during integration, not after it. You'll prime motor circuits, so partial plans wait just below threshold on the most likely branches. You'll cut hardware and environment latency, so cleaner signals hit sooner. And you'll measure everything: simple, choice, and go, no-go reaction times, fastest decile, false alarms, because superhuman means statistically exceptional for you, not comic book impossible. Set your baseline today. Then we move through the arc: how early vision privileges change over detail, why flash lag is a receipt for prediction, how postdiction edits the past, where saccades hide frames, and how stimulus to movement really unfolds. From there, we'll stack drills and design so your decisions arrive earlier. Clean, not lucky. Early vision, where 12 milliseconds are born. Shrink the scene to a single photon. It lands on a cone in your fovea. The opsin flips, ion channels close, current drops, and a spike train begins. Cones do this fast, tens of milliseconds, built for daylight and sudden change. Rods run the night shift, slower to transduce, more sensitive, and easy to saturate. That split already bends time. In bright scenes, cone-heavy vision feeds quick updates. In dim scenes, rod weight adds lag. Your now starts staggered by lighting before the signal even leaves the eye. The retina isn't a camera, it's a circuit board. Photoreceptors talk to bipolar cells, which split into on and off lines. One flags increments in light, the other decrements. Amacrine cells lace lateral shortcuts, shaping timing, emphasizing onsets and suppressing background. Then ganglion cells, dozens of functional types, encode the result into spikes for the brain. Each synapse adds micro-latency, but timing isn't uniform. Cells tuned for change, flicker, edges, motion, fire earlier than cells tuned for fine texture. The code your brain gets is time-stamped by urgency, not just brightness. Two dominant highways sprint that code forward. The magnocellular pathway carries high temporal frequency, high contrast, low color fidelity, the motion and onset stream. The parvocellular pathway carries high spatial detail and color, the fine pattern stream. Both run through the lateral geniculate nucleus and into primary visual cortex, V1. By the time a crisp volley hits V1, the triggering event is typically 30 to 100 milliseconds old, with magno often leading parvo. That asymmetry is a feature. If something moves, you want a rough position fast, then details if there's time. Inside V1, neurons aren't passive pixels. They prefer edges at specific orientations and positions. Some ramp on sudden appearance. Others prefer a bar sliding across the field. That preference shows up as timing. Motion-sensitive circuits can respond earlier to a moving edge than flash-preferring circuits do to a sudden static flash. Stack a few synapses, and you get differential latency. Motion arrives in perception earlier than a snapshot. Later, this fuels illusions like flash lag. Right now, it's survival math. Favor movers, because movers matter. Speed costs detail. The magno stream blurs fine texture and ignores most color. It's built to catch the toss from the corner of your eye, not to read a label. Parvo brings the crispness, but slower. So the system hedges. Sketch fast with magno, then layer parvo detail. You felt this two-stage reveal when a twitch in shadow becomes a cat's tail a heartbeat later. Your experience privileges deltas, onsets, edges, motion bursts, because they're cheaper in time. A micro story makes the numbers real. A pro hitter has about 400 milliseconds from pitch release to plate. The swing or don't decision needs to launch roughly 150 to 200 milliseconds after release. In the first 80 milliseconds, the eyes catch magno-friendly cues. Arm slot, wrist angle, the first flicker of spin. The brain extrapolates trajectory before parvo can fully paint scene detail. Acting on the course model beats waiting. The barrel starts moving toward where the ball will be, not where it was seen last frame. Latency varies across the visual field. The fovea is dense with cones and direct wiring. Timing there is tight and crisp. The periphery pools inputs broadly, favors motion, and is more sensitive to low contrast, but with coarser timing and position estimates. That's why your eyes saccade, jump, 3 to 5 times per second, to drag targets into the fovea where resolution and timing are best. But each jump triggers saccadic suppression, around 30 to 80 milliseconds of damped visual sensitivity, which creates its own blind slice. The choreography becomes attend first, move eyes, then harvest detail, all while the brain stitches the blackout. Meanwhile, prediction is baked in from the first synapses. Many retinal ganglion cells emphasize change, reporting new rather than true. Stable input fades, onsets pop. In a control room or OR, that bias can hide quiet, important constants until they change. In traffic, it helps you catch a brake light twitch early. The bias is tunable. A surgeon steadies gaze and lighting to let parvo take the lead. A goalkeeper widens stance and attention to give magno priority. You do this by habit, not by speech, because speech is too slow. Context pulls the levers. In bright, high-contrast scenes, magno cues scream. In glare or haze, onsets smear and timing degrades. In low light, rods weigh in, stretching the path. Fatigue widens internal noise, making early magno estimates jittery. Arousal shifts thresholds. Amped up, you commit on weaker, earlier cues. Too calm, you wait for parvo to finish and pay with lateness. Your brain constantly reweights streams, so the next action lands inside the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window, where perception and movement feel fused. Here's the trade. Every extra millisecond you wait buys accuracy. Every millisecond you save risks error. Elite performers don't delete that curve, they place themselves on it. When cost of delay is high and misses are cheap, they lean into Magno and commit early. When precision matters and time cost is low, they hold fixation, steady lighting, and let Parvo build the truth. The system even adapts online. If the scene gets noisy, it hedges, shrinking forward projection. If motion is clean, it extrapolates further. All of this sets up what comes next. If motion-tuned circuits report earlier, and the brain bets on trajectories during the unavoidable 30 to 100 millisecond sensory lag, then we should sometimes see a mover ahead of a simultaneous flash, and we do. The flash lag illusion is the receipt. Prediction beats snapshots under delay. That bias isn't a bug, it's the brain's way to meet the world on time. The flash lag illusion. Prediction beats snapshot. Line up a moving dot with a flashing one. At the instant, they're physically aligned. You swear the mover is already ahead. It isn't. Your brain put it there. This is flash lag, the footprint of a system that won't trust snapshots when the world is in motion. Remember the unavoidable delays you're carrying. By the time a volley lands in primary visual cortex, the triggering event is already roughly 30 to 100 milliseconds old. If perception waited for a literal frame, motion would always be behind, and you'd reach for where things used to be. So the visual system cheats toward the future. It estimates where the mover will be by the time your perception is ready, then paints that forecast into your now. Researchers argue about the exact recipe, but the options rhyme. One model leans on motion extrapolation. Compute velocity from recent samples, then project position forward across the sensory lag. The flash has no history, no velocity, so it can't be projected. Result, the extrapolated mover seems ahead of an unprojected flash. Another model highlights differential latency. Motion-tuned circuits report earlier than the ones that prefer abrupt flashes, so the brain receives mover here before it receives flash here, shifting perceived alignment. A third view brings in postdiction inside the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window. The brain waits a short beat, blends just after information, and constructs a single story that places the mover farther along because later data implied it. What does the evidence say when you push it? Increase the mover's speed and the perceived lead grows. Disrupt the path with noise or a mask and the illusion shrinks. The continuity that supports extrapolation broke, so the system hedges. Bend the trajectory smoothly, and people still see it continuing along the expected arc at the flash. Evidence for a velocity-based guess, not a static comparison. Put everything inside a moving frame, and the reference changes. Flash lag can flip or morph because your brain is anchoring motion to that frame. Tweak the timing between events within the binding window and judgments about what was where when. Swing. Classic postdiction at work. Now translate it from the lab to the street. You're driving, glance left, and a cyclist cuts across. Your brain nudges their felt position slightly forward along their vector. That forward bias helps you aim braking and steering to where they'll be, not where they were. But relative to a static landmark, a parked truck, a crosswalk line, the same bias can make the cyclist feel a hair farther past the mark than reality. Overestimate the lead and you think you have room. Underestimate and you jam the brake too hard. In dense traffic, those millimeters of misplacement become fender benders. Sports lean on the bias on purpose. A quarterback throws to where the receiver will be. The extrapolation is already sketched into their now. A batter's swing starts toward the future crossing point, not the ball's mid-flight snapshot. Goalkeepers commit not to the current football contact, but to the path that will unfold across the next few tens of milliseconds. Flash lag makes those commitments feel right earlier. It also explains why trick pitches and deceptive moves are kryptonite. A true knuckleball breaks the priors. Without reliable spin-to-break mapping, extrapolation points wrong. In soccer, a winger's stutter that breaks trajectory continuity shrinks your illusion, forcing a later commit. In gaming, a shoulder peak with a sudden animation cancel disrupts your velocity estimate. If you commit on the expected path, you pre-aim into air. Attention is a lever here. Track the moving object tightly, and the perceived lag tends to grow. Your system is pouring gain into the motion channel that likes to extrapolate. Snap attention to the flash and the lag can shrink. You're giving weight to a channel that anchors timing differently. That's trainable. In high-speed tasks, lock attention to movers you must act on. In alignment tasks, surgery, microassembly, anchor attention to fixed reference marks to damp forward bias. Reference frames matter more than people realize. If the background drifts, think conveyor belts, escalators, or a taxiing aircraft. Your brain computes motion relative to that frame. Designers who ignore this end up with interfaces that feel late, even when their clocks are clean. Pilots learn to recalibrate on final approach because runway lights sliding under a moving frame can nudge perceived position forward. Flare timing drifts unless you pin a stable visual anchor. You can shape the illusion by shaping inputs. Clean lighting and high contrast sharpen velocity estimates. Stable, high refresh. Displays reduce smear, preserving the discrete samples the brain uses to compute speed. Variable refresh rates cut stutter that would otherwise inject phantom accelerations. Even a small change in pixel response time shifts how early a motion onset pops in your magno stream. Drills take it from concept to reflex. Train with accelerating, decelerating, and curved trajectories so your priors don't get brittle. Randomly occlude movers behind brief masks require direction calls at mask onset. You're forcing the classifier to rely on pre-mask velocity, the same way daily life hides motion behind posts and people. Track 3 numbers: your median commit lid, your hit rate, and your false alarm rate. If your lead gets earlier without a spike in false alarms, your extrapolation is improving. If false alarms climb, you're guessing. Lengthen the window and add foil farms that punish early commits on broken trajectories. There's a guardrail too. Flash lag helps when the world's physics are stable. When stakes punish wrong way, errors more than late ones. Surgery near a nerve, a merge with a truck. Bias attention to anchors, not movers. Widen the window, let parvo fill in, and accept a slightly later but safer call. The bottom line stays human. Your visual now is a truce between old photons and near-future guesses. Flash lag is the receipt your brain leaves when it chooses the guess. Train the priors, clean the inputs, steer your attention, and that guess lands where you need it, inside the binding window, where action and awareness feel like the same moment. Postdiction, future info, rewrites the recent past. You just watch the brain push a mover into the future. Now watch it edit the past. Postdiction is the quiet trick, where information that arrives after an event reshapes what you think just happened. Once you feel it, you'll spot it everywhere. Start with color phi. 2 brief flashes. Red here, green there, separated by a short space and a tight slice of time. People don't report red then green. They report a single thing sliding from red spot to greens, changing color mid-flight. Nothing moved. The path and the mid-air morph are written in during a short pause while the brain gathers just after data to build a cleaner story. That pause sits inside the temporal binding window, roughly 80 to 200 milliseconds, where the system fuses inputs into one moment. Inside the window, order softens and coherence wins. Step outside it, and events split apart. This edit bay doesn't only smooth vision, it changes judgments of cause and order. Present a tone and a flash within the binding window, and they feel simultaneous even when one is earlier. Nudge the second event closer, and the first can be pulled toward it in memory. In labs, a quick second flash can drag the felt location of the first along a path that never existed. In life, that nudge lives in traffic, clinics, and courts. Did you brake because you saw the light, or did the light land just after your foot was already moving? Your story says one thing, your motor system might show another. Libet's work pokes right here. In self-paced moves, a readiness potential. Neural build-up toward action often ramps 335 to 550 milliseconds before people report deciding to move. Debate lives in the interpretation, but one piece is solid. Conscious timing is pliable. Reported decision moments can be pulled toward the action that already launched, colored by postdiction inside that binding window. In stimulus-driven tasks, the ramp is faster, thresholds matter more, but the same principle holds. The machinery starts, then the story catches up and tidies. Now layer in saccades. During rapid eye jumps, visual sensitivity drops for around 30 to 80 milliseconds. You don't experience a blackout. The brain predicts where the scene will land after the jump and then blends pre- and post images into one steady world. If a brief event happens squarely inside that suppression slice, an LED flicker, a single frame warning, it can vanish. Postdiction fills the gap with continuity, and you'll swear nothing was missed. The edit worked too well. Designers ride or wreck this every day. In surgery, a cautery tone and a tissue color change need to fall inside the window to feel linked. If a display pipeline or camera adds delay that pushes the color shift late relative to the tone, the loop phrase and trust drops. In aviation, a stall horn has to sync with nose buffet and horizon motion. Break that bundle and pilots learn to ignore the horn. In officiating, a late whistle can feel earlier because the brain yokes it to the visible foul inside the window. Perception isn't a timestamp, it's an edited cut. You can work with it. First, time critical cues to land together. Keep audio and visual feedback within about 100 milliseconds when you want them fused. Second, use redundancy. Pair short tones with haptics or longer visual pulses. Saccadic suppression won't touch a buzz in your hand, and a visual that lasts more than a saccade, over 100 milliseconds, survives eye jumps. Third, train order sense. Run quick sessions where you judge which came first, a click or a flash, stepping separations down until you can cleanly call 50 to 70 milliseconds. Sharpening that just noticeable asynchrony tightens your internal gate, making off timings feel louder. A micro story shows the stakes. An operator scans 4 monitors. Eyes hop, row to row, 3, 4 times a second. On one feed, a radiation indicator flicks high for 20 milliseconds, then normal. If that pulse lands inside a saccade into or out of that screen, it's gone. The operator's brain stitches the second into a stable minute, no awareness of a whole. Add a short chirp mapped to that exact threshold, and the audio onset cuts through, yanking attention back. The visual alone was fragile, the paired cue was robust. Another, a tennis player times a split step on a serve. The squeak of the shoe and the blur of motion should braid into one act. On a slow court with echo, the sound lags the sight by a hair outside the window, and the split arrives late. The player adds a faint breath cue tied to toss height, an internal anchor that lands on time no matter the room. Postdiction still edits, but the reference is steadier. Accepting postdiction isn't losing agency, it's upgrading it. Once you know your now includes a thin slice of after, you can place key cues inside that slice on purpose, stack channels so one survives suppression, and stop arguing with ghosts about what happened first. Your story gets cleaner, your actions land sooner, and when order really matters, you lean on anchors, not guesses, and let the brain edit toward safety. Saccadic suppression, blind spots. You never notice. Your eyes don't pan like a camera, they snap. 3 to 5 times every second, they rocket to a new target in a ballistic jump called a saccade. During each jump, the visual system turns down its own gain. For roughly 30 to 80 milliseconds around that movement, sensitivity to motion and low spatial frequencies is damped. You don't feel a blackout, you feel a rock-steady world, because prediction and postdiction bridge the gap while you move. Why mute the feed at all? Because a saccade can exceed hundreds of degrees per second. If the brain let raw frames flow, the entire scene would smear across your retina. Every glance from speedometer to road would look like a paint streak, so the system flips 2 switches. First, a forward model, an efference copy of your own eye command, predicts where the world will land on your retina after the jump. Second, suppression reduces sensitivity during the flight, so smear never reaches awareness. The cost is hidden but real. Brief, critical events that occur squarely inside that 30 to 80 millisecond slice can vanish from experience. There's a simple test. Stand before a mirror and flick your gaze left to right. You can't watch your own eyes move. The motion is invisible because suppression masks it. Record yourself and play it back. Those jumps are obvious to the camera. Your brain deleted them to keep the world stable. Useful most of the time, dangerous at the margins. Now raise the stakes. An operator scans a wall of monitors. Pressure, temperature, security. Eyes hop row to row, rhythm tight. One indicator spikes high for 15 milliseconds, then returns. If that pulse lands inside a jump into or out of that screen, it leaves no trace. The brain stitches pre- and post frames into a single minute of continuity. and the operator's story contains a hole they can't report. Add a mapped chirp with a fast attack, and the onset cuts through suppression. Attention yanks back in time to act. Driving turns it into a daily gamble. You glance from rear view to windshield to instrument cluster, each with its own suppression envelope. 2 cars ahead, a single brake tap flickers. If that one frame red falls inside a jump, you never consciously see it. Lower channels might still twitch your foot, but your narrative insists there was no light. There wasn't in the stream your awareness received. Sport lives here too. A tennis returner snaps gaze from toss to expected contact. If the racket face throws a micro glint at impact during that jump, suppression hides it, starving your prediction engine. In soccer, a winger sells a feint. Your eyes trigger a saccade toward the fake. Suppression blinds you to the first true frame of the cut. Defenders call it being sent the wrong way. Part biomechanics, part timing. The tail fell into the blind slice. Why don't we notice? Because attention leads the eyes by a beat. Covert attention often shifts to the new location tens of milliseconds before the jump. That pre-allocation lets the brain start building the after scene early, smoothing the splice. Then postdiction inside the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window pulls just after information into your now erasing seams. It's elegant, until a transient that matters lands in the seam. You can work around it. First, change what's at risk of disappearing. Make critical visuals last longer than a saccade, over 100 milliseconds, and repeat them in short trains, so at least one pulse survives. Pair visuals with audio or haptics. Suppression is visual, not auditory or tactile. A one-cycle buzz or a sharp tone with fast onset survives the jump and drags your eyes back. Second, time your gaze shifts. Practice a microbeat. Attend, then move. In surgery, assembly, or gaming, slide attention to the next target before you snap the eyes. That covert lead catches last moment transients and primes the forward model so the after image locks quicker. Third, choreograph the scan path. Fewer, longer fixations beat frantic ping pong. Each saccade is a blind gamble. Each fixation lets slower, detail-rich channels fill in. Group critical indicators into one foveal zone to shorten jumps. In dashboards, keep high-priority alerts near habitual gaze. Road center, speed readout, so even unplanned saccades are short, and suppression overlaps less with hazard cues. Fourth, manage lighting and contrast. Your fast channels love crisp onsets. Avoid flickering bulbs that add noise. Raise contrast on alerts. Give them edge shapes and motion that persists. In dark rooms, don't crush blacks. Subtle motion disappears. In bright glare, use shading so onsets don't wash out. Finally, accept limits. You can't abolish saccadic suppression. You can design around it. Hold gaze when detail matters, make alerts last, tack channels, and move attention first. In live stakes, driving ORs, control rooms, build redundancy, not bravado. You're not weaker for admitting a 30 to 80 millisecond hole. You're faster for planning what survives it. Reaction time anatomy, from light to movement. By now you know perception runs on delay and prediction. Reaction is the other half. How a photon in your eye becomes force in a muscle, fast enough to matter. It isn't one timer. It's a relay with adjustable handoffs and thresholds. Start with labels because the names hide stakes. Simple reaction time is one stimulus, one response. Light on, tap. Healthy adults cluster near 180 to 220 milliseconds when rested and attentive. Add a branch. Red means press A, green means press B, and you've got a choice reaction. Now you're closer to 250 to 330 milliseconds because selection takes time. Go, no go, sits in between. Hit only on target, hold on foils. It sounds trivial until false alarms sneak in and the penalty becomes a blown start, a wasted click, or a misfire. Under the hood, the path starts where we left it. Photons hit cones, signals traverse retina and lateral geniculate, and a volley reaches primary visual cortex, roughly 30 to 100 milliseconds after the event. Then, association areas bind features, shape, motion, relevance, while attention tilts gain toward what matters. None of this waits for a narrator. When the target's features match a prepared policy, evidence begins to ramp in decision circuits. That ramp is the key motif. In motor and premotor cortex, basal ganglia, and parietal regions, populations accumulate evidence toward a threshold, drift to bound dynamics. Cross the bound, and the command launches. This is the cousin of Libet's readiness potential you've heard about. In self-paced moves, a slow build-up often starts 335 to 550 milliseconds before people report deciding. In stimulus-driven moves, the ramp is faster, but it's the same architecture. Preparation below awareness, threshold setting above it. The command drops into corticospinal tracts and heads south. Spinal circuits aren't dumb pipes. They gate with reflex arcs and reciprocal inhibition. If antagonists co-contract, your first millimeters are a tug of war. If you've quietly inhibited them and preloaded agonists, the first motor units are already recruited. Fascia is taut, and motion per millisecond jumps. Arousal rides shotgun on this whole route. Too low, and evidence creeps. You wait for extra confirmation and slide late. Too high, and thresholds collapse. Noise trips you, and false starts explode. Breath tweaks this in seconds. One sharp inhale before a go-heavy block raises alertness. One long exhale before a no-go trial nudges thresholds up, so hold stick. Posture does it too. A neutral, spring-loaded base reduces co-contraction and frees the first 50 milliseconds that sloppy stance taxes. Startle sits on a back road. If an action is truly primed, details loaded, muscles biased, a sudden loud sound can release it through subcortical routes in 80 to 120 milliseconds. Labs love this, life treats it carefully. It proves deep preparation exists, but you map startling cues to freeze or cancel in risky domains, not to go. The trade-off you keep hearing about, speed versus accuracy, shows up as Fitt's law in aiming and as criterion setting in decisions. Lower the bound and you go sooner with more errors. Raise it and you go cleaner, but later. Elite performers don't delete the curve. They structure choices so the bound can sit lower without inviting chaos. That looks like pruning branches with if-then policies, narrowing anticipation windows, and staging partial motor plans on the most likely options. A goalkeeper on penalties is a live diagram. They don't wait for ball-foot contact and then start from zero. Approach angle, hip closure, plant depth, and tempo collapse the decision tree, a beat early. Two dives sit warm at threshold, left mid, left low, while hold hovers. One valid cue tips a preloaded branch over inside the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window, and the dive looks early. It isn't guesswork, it's selective preparation. Daily life scales the same way. In rain, you widen following distance, hover your foot over brake, and bias attention to tail light micro-oscillations. That lowers the bound for braking and raises it for a lane change. In a kitchen, you stage tools within one reach, stand square, and keep the knife hand loose. When the onion slides, your correction launches before your story forms. On a desk, you cluster hotkeys under two fingers and remap awkward chords. Selection latency is posture now, not cognition. Hardware and pipelines modulate the front end. High refresh, low smear displays preserve motion onsets, so your Magno channel feeds evidence sooner. Clean audio onsets, map to critical states, slip past saccadic suppression, and seed ramps earlier. Input devices with high polling rates shave quantization. Predictable latency beats peak specs. Measurement keeps you honest. Don't worship one number, watch distributions. Track median and fastest decile for simple and choice tasks, plus false alarm rates. Train the fast tail wider without a false alarm spike. In choice tasks, log error patterns. If all mistakes are premature hits, your bound is too low. If they're all misses, you're sitting on decisions. Guardrails matter. Earlier commits raise risk. Counter with foil farms that reward clean holds on look-alike lures. Build redundancy in environments. Longer visual pulses paired with short tones. So Saccadic suppression doesn't erase cues. Use breath and stance to stabilize thresholds when fatigue widens noise. And respect days when biology drifts. Sleep debt, meds, stress. On those, raise bounds, simplify choices, and lean on anchors. From light to movement, reaction isn't twitch, it's architecture. Detect cleaner, bias attention, accumulate on fewer branches, prime muscles, and keep the path short. Do that, and the launch slides inside the binding window, where it feels like you moved the instant the world changed. Hack 1. Train anticipation windows. If priors win races, then we train priors. Not vague, be more aware talk. Tight cues, shrinking margins, and a scoreboard that punishes guesswork. The goal is simple. Collapse your decision tree before the full stimulus lands, so the launch happens inside that 80 to 200 millisecond binding window, where it feels instantaneous and still stays clean. Start with a cue map for your arena. Sports. Hip load, shoulder rotation, plant foot angle, approach tempo, grip tension. Driving. Lead car micro oscillations, lane drift rhythm, head dip in mirrors, the first brake light twitch. Gaming. Shoulder peaks, strafe cadence, animation cancels, reload clicks, scope swap. You're hunting signals that arrive through fast temporal channels, motion onsets, contrast edges, crisp sounds, because those reach cortex early, often within that 30 to 100 millisecond visual lag, while ears stamp clean timing. Now build a library under noise. Capture clips with 1 second of context before the true action. Annotate frame accurate onset of the action, then mark the earliest frame where a predictive cue appears reliably. No hindsight allowed. That delta is your anticipation window for that pattern. Across reps, you'll see a spread. Some cues by 220 milliseconds, others only 80. That distribution is your starter map, not your ceiling. Turn it into drills that compress time. Structure window narrowing blocks. Begin generous. Expose a clear cue at minus 250 milliseconds, then the action. Your job is to commit on the cue, not the action. Each block shave 20 to 30 milliseconds off the lead. The instant false alarms exceed your cap, say 10%, hold the window until accuracy stabilizes. Track 4 numbers every session. Median decision lead, hit rate, false alarm rate, and bias. Visualize them. Your wins are earlier medians with flat false alarm lines. Make it specific. A goalkeeper trains on penalties. A metronome ticks. On beat 1, you freeze a frame at plant. On beat 2, show football contact. Call direction and height before beat 2. Tighten the beats until accuracy dips, then work at the edge. A driver runs a sim. AI cars vary brake light onset and deceleration. Commit to throttle lift. On lead car body cues, the head dip, oscillation snap, not on the light itself. A gamer builds an aim map. Bots shoulder peak with varied cadence and footstep patterns. You pre-aim based on sound plus trajectory and record if the shot lands inside a set error circle. Interleave and space to prevent brittle priors. Rotate left and right-footed takers, wet and dry turf, day and night lighting. Mix vehicles with different tail light timings. Alternate opponents who stutter step versus wide swings. Randomize within sessions so your brain learns invariant cues, not scripts. Space sessions across days. Consolidation hardens templates. Stack redundancy for the channels you own. Audio often stamps onset cleaner than vision. In drills, drop a faint pre-cue tone. Context ready, then embed the visual cue. In the real world, map distinct, brief tones to specific states. A 2-note chirp for lead car decel, a tight tick for reload complete. Keep attacks fast and duration short so tones don't mask other cues, but make onsets unmistakable. Add implementation intentions to compress choice. If X, then Y. If plant closes and hip rotates right, then dive left mid. If footsteps accelerate and crosshair wobble quiets, then pre-fire 2. If head dips and lateral jitter stops, then hover brake. Say them out loud before the block. 1 slow motion rep for each sets posture and preload. You're wiring fast gates, so selection sits upstream of the go signal. Guardrails keep speed honest. Run weekly foil farms, structured lures that mimic your cues, but go nowhere. Reward holds, penalize jumps. This tightens your criterion so earlier commits don't slide into guesses. Calibrate arousal at the top of each block. 2 cycles of box breathing to steady thresholds, then 1 sharp inhale to tag alertness. When thresholds wobble, false alarms climb for no clear reason. Reset, state, before chasing settings. Design your environment to shorten the path from cue to act. Group critical visuals into 1 foveal zone to minimize saccades that could hide a 1-frame tell in a 30 to 80 millisecond blind slice. Raise contrast and stabilize lighting so motion onsets pop. Use high refresh, low smear displays so velocity estimates tighten. Map hotkeys to tight clusters. Shorten motor paths so commits don't pay a posture tax. Finish every session with transfer. One live rep, pickup penalty, real commute merge, ranked round, then log outcome, confidence, and whether you were early on time or late. Review tape weekly. Sort misses. No cue, misread cue, or missing chunk. Build next week's deck from those misses, not from memory. Over months, your median commit creeps earlier, your fastest decile widens, and your false alarm line stays tame. That's superhuman for you. Decisions launching inside the binding window, clean enough to trust, fast enough to look unfair. Hack 2. Reduce input latency in your world. We've tightened your anticipation window. Now bring the world to you faster, so those early commits ride cleaner signals. Input latency is everything between the real event and your first neural spikes. Trim it, stabilize it, and your priors stop guessing through fog. Start with displays. Refresh rate sets your time grid. 60 Hz updates every 16.7 milliseconds. 120 Hz halves that. 240 Hz slices it to about 4.2 milliseconds. Higher refresh doesn't make you a superhero. It reduces how long motion waits in a queue and how much smear hides onsets. Panel response time matters too. A slow gray-to-gray panel drags motion, smearing the very edges your magnocellular stream relies on. Turn on overdrive to speed transitions, then back it down if you see halos. Overshoot creates fake motion that poisons velocity estimates. Variable refresh rate tech, G-Sync, FreeSync, syncs delivery to real frame timing, cutting stutter that looks like phantom speed changes. In anything time critical, lock to the highest refresh you can sustain stably. Jitter hurts more than peak spec helps. Calibrate brightness and contrast for onsets, not prettiness. High contrast pops earlier in your temporal channels. In bright rooms, raise luminance so signals don't drown in glare and glare. In dark rooms, avoid crushing blacks. Subtle motion disappears into mud. Kill motion blur filters. They're cinematic, but they smear the transients you train to read. Now inputs. Polling rate is your device clock. A mouse at 125 Hz reports every 8 milliseconds. At 100 Hz, it reports every millisecond. That headroom lets small movements register sooner. Mechanical keyboards add debounce delay. Configurable firmware can trim it without inviting chatter. Wireless isn't evil, but cheap links add unpredictable transit time. Predictability beats romance. Use wired or proven low latency protocols for high-stakes tasks. For touchscreens, latency stacks. Sensor scan, controller processing, OS compositor, and display refresh. Use devices with high touch sample rates and raw paths in apps that support them. Disable heavy animations and background effects that pad the pipeline. In creative apps, enable high performance drawing. In games, choose raw input over OS smoothing. Lighting is reaction time you can feel. Your fast visual channels love crisp edges. Cheap LEDs can flicker at mains frequency. You won't see it, but your system eats it as noise. Use high-quality, high-frequency LED or indirect daylight. Place task lights to cast edge shadows. A rolling knife or slipping tool throws a clean onset your brain catches earlier. Audio outruns vision for alerts because the auditory pathway preserves onset timing precisely and doesn't suffer saccadic suppression. For hazards and key states, use short, distinct tones with fast attack. Map meaning consistently. One signature for act now, another for confirm, another for error. Separate them in pitch and timbre so masking is rare. Keep them brief so they don't drown other cues, but loud enough to clear ambient noise by a notch, not a blast. Ergonomics is hidden latency. Shorten motor paths so the first millimeters are free. At a desk, set chair height to keep elbows near 90, shoulders neutral, wrists straight. Remap heavy shortcuts to a tight cluster your fingers already inhabit. For a mouse flick, float the forearm and set DPI so you finish inside a small arc, not at end range. In a car, set seat and wheel so braking is a hinge at ankle and knee, not a leg slide. Less travel, faster onset. In kitchens and shops, stage tools within a half turn. You can't recover a slip if your base is twisted. Software can sabotage a clean pipeline. Prefer full screen exclusive over composited windows where possible. Cap frame rate to what your monitor can hold. Dropped or uneven frames create false acceleration. Turn off heavy post-processing that adds render time. In conferencing or streaming, pick low latency modes, a few hundred. Milliseconds shifts conversational timing, which shifts your thresholds. Structure your visual field to beat saccades. Group critical indicators in one foveal zone, so fewer jumps risk hiding, a one-frame tell inside the 30 to 80 millisecond blind slice. Make act now elements large, high contrast, and near habitual gaze. Push think later items peripheral and subtle. Pair color with shape and iconography, so if one channel fails, another carries meaning. Do micro audits. Use a phone at 240 frames per second. Record an alert firing and your response. Count frames from onset to movement onset. Change one variable, display mode, brightness, polling rate, then retest. You're chasing stability as much as speed. A pipeline with low variance lets your brain lock priors tighter. Jitter forces hedging that costs time. Respect state. A perfect setup with a tired operator is slow. Schedule high tempo blocks when you're sharp. Dose caffeine early and purposefully. Late dosing steals sleep and pays you back with jitter tomorrow. Insert short resets. Stand, one slow exhale, 10-beat deviation checks to keep thresholds from drifting. Finally, make redundancy your default. Visual alerts should last longer than a saccade, and, when possible, animate gently for more than 100 milliseconds. Pair them with a brief tone. In cars, keep forward collision chirps enabled. In ORs and control rooms, stack audio and haptics on critical thresholds. You can't abolish the brain's delays, but you can make your world arrive inside the binding window. Clean, Hack 3, early, pre-motor priming and implementation intentions. We've cleaned the inputs and tightened anticipation. Now we preload the action itself, so a valid cue tips you over the edge inside that 80 to 200 millisecond binding window. Pre-motor priming is partial preparation. You set posture, muscle tone, and policy, so selection is already done and the first millimeters are free. Start with language your brain can execute at speed. If X, then Y. These are implementation intentions, not slogans. If plant foot closes and hips rotate right, then dive left mid. If footsteps accelerate and crosshair wobble quiets, then pre-fire 2. If head dips and lateral jitter stops, then hover brake. Say them out loud before a block. One slow motion rehearsal cements posture and path. You're taking a fat decision tree and collapsing it into a switch that a single cue can close. Now put muscle under the words. Preload agonists lightly, 5 to 10% tension, so motor units are recruited and connective tissue is taut. Quiet antagonists so you're not fighting yourself at go. For a lateral dive, that's glute med and adductors on deck, contralateral adductors relaxed. For a mouse flick, forearm flexors warm, scapula set, traps soft. Stance matters. Feet under hips, knees soft, center of mass, slightly forward. A narrow, locked stance adds a hidden 30 to 50 milliseconds of posture tax you'll never see on tape, but always pay. Breathe like it's a control knob, because it is. One sharp nasal inhale at block start raises alertness. One long exhale before a hold trial nudges thresholds up so you don't leak early. Pair breaths to policies until they fuse. Inhale, hold, launch for go. Slow exhale for no-go. After a week, the breath isn't decoration. It's part of the policy that shifts drift-to-bound dynamics in your favor. Prime with specificity, not soup. Load at most 2 branches per block. Too many branches smear prep across antagonists and slow you down. Block example for a goalkeeper. Policy A. If plant shallow and hip closed, dive left mid. Policy B. If plant deep and torso upright, hold. Speak both, set stance, run 10 rapid trials with random cues. Score immediate correctness and penalize false starts with a 5-second isometric to make not yet a felt action. Build go with foils and hold with baits into every set. On 60% of trials, a valid cue appears and you launch. On 40%, a near-miss bait appears. One cue without the confirm, and you must hold. This protects criteria as you prime higher. Track 4 numbers, launch latency from cue, correct go rate, false start rate, and hold purity. You want faster launches with flat false starts and clean holds. Add startle-aware safeguards. Yes, a loud onset can release a primed action in 80 to 120 milliseconds through subcortical routes when prep is real. The lesson isn't to blast horns, it's to acknowledge that deep priming gives multiple exits. In cars, shops, or the OR, map surprising sounds to freeze or cancel, not go. In sport drills, you can occasionally pulse a soft click at cue onset to highlight how ready you are without yanking you unsafe. Make the prep visible with simple biofeedback. A cheap EMG on forearm for aimers, a pressure mat under the lead foot for keepers, or a grip dynamometer for general prep. Target a steady 70 to 85% readiness level, high enough that a valid cue crosses threshold fast, low enough that a foil doesn't spill you. Watch how stress creeps that baseline up. Use a long exhale to bring it back before the next trial. Design example sets across domains. Gaming, 2 policy block. If shoulder high peak with footstep cadence rising, micro flick head. If low jiggle with cadence flat, hold and pre-fire 2. Randomize 20 trials, 8 foils, score latency and errors, finish with 3 described trials. Name the cues you used, which keeps chunks explicit. Driving sim, hover brake policy. If head dip plus oscillation snap, hover brake. If brake light only with no body cues, hold. Map a brief chirp to valid combos so the tone's onset pins timing even during a saccade. Tighten timing as hold purity stays above 85%. Goalkeeping, left-footed taker deck. If 3-step tempo slows at step 2 and plant shallow, dive left mid. If tempo steady and plant deep, hold. Freeze then go display. Show plant frame, then release contact frame on a beat. Tighten beats as accuracy stays high. Rotate policies block to block, so specificity stays sharp without diluting prep. Between blocks, clear the slate. Shake out antagonists, 2 slow breaths, reset stance, restate the next pair. Close with live transfer and a guardrail. Run 1 real rep, ranked round, actual commute merge, pickup penalty, and log whether the launch felt inevitable or forced, plus any false start. If false starts creep, reduce preload and raise your confirmed criterion. Require 2 cues, not 1. Primed isn't paranoid. It's a quiet spring you control. Done right, the movement begins where your story used to, and your story arrives just in time to take credit. Hack 4, Temporal Resolution Training. We've primed posture and policies. Now we tune the clock those policies run on. Temporal Resolution Training teaches your nervous system to spot smaller gaps and cleaner order, so onsets pop sooner and misalignments feel loud, not vague. Think sanding the grain of time until 20 to 40 millisecond jitters. Stop fooling you and the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window works for you, not against you. Start with beat discrimination. Set a metronome at 120 BPM, 1 beat every 500 milliseconds. Tap along for 30 seconds to lock phase. Now nudge single beats early by 40 milliseconds, then 30, then 20. Your job is binary, early or on time. Keep accuracy at or above 80% before shaving further. Switch to alternating intervals, 500 and 450 milliseconds, then 500 and 430 to push sensitivity to sub 50 millisecond changes. You're training auditory onsets, which stamp timing crisply and don't suffer saccadic suppression to tighten the internal gate you'll use across senses. Add gap detection. Play 2 clicks with a silent gap. Start at 80 milliseconds and shrink. 60, 40, 30, even 20 on good days. Answer 1 or 2. Short sets, 30 trials, then rest. Mix in noise, room, hum, street sounds, music, to force the system to pull edges from clutter. Your magnocellular-like auditory channels thrive on fast onsets. Noise blurs them. Robustness under blur is the payoff you'll feel in gyms, traffic, comms, and crowded hallways. Layer temporal order judgment. Flash a light and play a click with controlled separation. Begin at 120 milliseconds, then walk down 90, 70, 50, 30, 30, which came first, light or sound. Randomize leads, so guessing dies. This cross-modal drill hits the heart of daily life. Did the brake light precede the deceleration thump, or did your foot move first? Shrinking your just noticeable asynchrony helps you keep events in order inside the binding window, instead of letting Postdiction rewrite them. Now entrainment for stability. 1 minute, tap to an isochronous beat. Next minute, generate the beat without the metronome. Then tap on offbeats to force internal timing over external onsets. Drummers call it groove. Surgeons get steadier knot sequences. Editors cut cleaner frames. Operators keep their scan rhythm when screens stutter. A steadier internal pacer reduces reliance on last-second saccades, which means fewer critical frames land in that 30 to 80 millisecond blind slice. Bring vision in gently. Use a visual timing app that flashes a square at regular intervals. Judge early or late while holding gaze still. No eye jumps. You're teaching slower visual channels to track phase without leaning on saccades and their stitched edits. Mix in micro motion pulses, 2 to 3 frames at high refresh, and ask same/different as spacing shrinks. You'll feel where your display's true temporal limit sits for you, not just on paper. Turn drills into primers. Before a drive, do 60 seconds of click early/late at moderate difficulty. Before gaming, run a minute of audio-visual order judgment at your 70% threshold. Before surgery, soldering, or color-critical grading, tap offbeats for a minute. These aren't workouts, they're sharpens. They tighten thresholds so pre-motor priming and anticipation windows fire clean, not jittery. Measure for truth. Track the smallest beat deviation and gap you can detect at 80% accuracy, plus your cross-modal order threshold. Expect quick gains in 2 weeks, then slower creep. If you plateau, add spacing. Every other day to let consolidation harden circuits. Rotate noise types weekly, so skill transfers. Keep sessions 5 to 8 minutes. Fatigue trains slop. Guardrails keep this safe. Moderate volumes protect hearing. If accuracy craters widen gaps, you're training precision, not white-knuckle grit. Avoid late-night sessions that jack arousal and steal sleep. The master reset that tightens timing everywhere. If migraines, concussion history, or neurological issues are in play, clear high-intensity timing drills with a clinician and bias toward gentler entrainment. A micro-story for the field. A resident started a 1-minute metronome primer before suturing. 10 early/late judgments at 30 milliseconds, then 10 at 20. 2 weeks in, their first throw stopped hitching. Not because fingers got stronger, but because ready arrived earlier in awareness. Walking home, a crosswalk chirp lagged the blink by a hair. They slowed a step before the crowd. Same eyes, same street, finer grain. The thread back to our core numbers is tight. You're chipping down the just noticeable differences that live under the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window, giving your system earlier, cleaner edges to seed ramps. That turns preloaded policies into launches that happen where your story used to start, and it makes post-dicted edits easier to spot and, when needed, override. Hack 5. Deliberate practice for pattern speed. We've tuned your clock and primed your launch. Now we teach your brain to see more with less. Pattern speed is collapsing messy scenes into fast, reliable chunks, so choice shrinks before it taxes time. It isn't repetition for stamina. It's deliberate practice that sculpts what pops first. Start with chunking. Raw cues are slow, templates are quick. Name compact units you can spot in one glance or one beat. Closed hip plus shallow plant, stutter step plus toe flare, shoulder peak plus footfall stop, head dip plus oscillation snap. Say the chunk aloud when you catch it. Language welds features, so your cortex lights them as one thing. You're reducing the bits your drift-bound system needs before it tips, pulling the commit inside that 80 to 200 millisecond binding window. Now force chunking with design. Build rapid serial clips that only show half a second of context, masked with noise, and demand a one-beat call. Label the chunk or pick the branch. Keep exposure short enough that parvocellular detail can't bail you out. Magnocellular onsets and trajectories must carry the decision. Give immediate feedback within about 300 milliseconds, a green flash, and the correct label. Delay kills learning here. Your brain needs a tie between what it felt and what it was. Interleave, don't block. 5 minutes of only left-footed takers feels great and teaches nothing about selection under shift. Shuffle left and right approaches, then inject decoys that go nowhere. In gaming drills, alternate maps, and audio mixes in a single set. Dry corridor, echoing hall, outdoor wind. In driving sims, mix wet glare, dry shade, and dusk flicker during the same 10 minutes. The desirable difficulty spikes error a little, but hardens chunks against context switches. Vary the surface, keep the rule. If the deep mapping is closed, hip predicts left mid, change jerseys, lighting, grass length, and camera height, but keep the biomechanics true until the chunk sticks. Then generalize. New shooters, new stadiums, new lenses. When a template transfers, you own it. When it breaks, you found an overfit. Refine the rule to the invariant feature and try again. Use speed ladders. Start at 50% playback to annotate cue onset and confirm the chunk. Climb to 75%, 90%, 100%, and sprinkle brief 110% overspeed bursts. At each rung, require stable accuracy before moving up. Overspeed feels awkward. Cap set so form doesn't collapse. You're conditioning the classifier to fire under tighter time, not to guess earlier. Layer dual feedback. Video alone is story, add timing truth. Overlay your decision moment as a vertical tick relative to true onset. Watch that tick slide earlier across weeks without a matching rise in false alarms. For aim tasks, add pre-aim heat maps versus actual emergence points. Tighter clusters mean cleaner chunks guiding your flash lag tune projections. Bake in micro-explanations. Every third rep, freeze and say the cues you used: hip angle, plant depth, tempo. If you can't articulate them, you're chasing vibes. Every 10th rep, hunt the foil. Find the clip that fakes 2 cues but breaks 1. This vaccinate against bait step keeps your criterion from drifting as you push speed. Make it live with domain recipes, goalkeeper deck, randomized penalty clips at variable tempos. 1 beat preview stops at plant. You call direction and height before contact reveals. Interleave left and right-footed takers, wet and dry turf, day and night. Track median lid, accuracy, false alarm rate, and side bias. If bias creeps, add mirror-only blocks to recenter. Driver sim, following distance microhazards. Train chunks like head dip plus oscillation snap means impending decel. Randomize brake light latencies and deceleration profiles. Commit on body cues, not lamps. Score early lifts that avoid red without false lifts that stack tailgaters. Gamer aim map, shoulder peak families. Build 2 core chunks, high shoulder plus rising steps, and low jiggle plus steady steps. Bots randomize cadence and throw animation cancels. You pre-aim on the chunk, not the model. Penalize pre-fires into air. Reward holds on baits. Keep sessions short and sharp, 10 to 15 minutes. Cap error at about 15%. If misses climb, slow playback or widen windows. You're training precision under time, not panic. Track 3 numbers weekly: median decision lead, accuracy, and false alarm rate. Your goal is earlier medians, flat or rising accuracy, stable false alarms. Pull in real life. Pattern speed saves ankles and bumpers. Film a hallway and tag safe versus slippery from a single glance. Glare streaks, thin films, reflection edges. Build a 10-clip deck and train once a week. Record dash cam snippets and annotate early break twitches, lane drift rhythms, and head dips. Make them chunks with names you can say in a beat. When your foot lifts before the lamp because the drift rhythm snapped, that's transfer. Close each block with 1 perfect normal speed rep, the feel you want to carry out, then stop. Fatigue breeds timing slop and bad priors. Rotate 3 to 5 core chunks per season. Deepen them before adding more. Review tape where you were late. Ask, miscue, misread, or missing chunk. Build next week from that. Over months, the hesitation vanishes. Chunks fire, branches collapse, and the launch happens where your story used to start. Inside the window, when timing fails, feel like inevitability. Aging, fatigue, drugs, illness. Everything you've built rides on biology that shifts. Some days your window is tight, some days it drifts. Knowing when and why it drifts keeps you fast and safe. Start with sleep. 1 missed night doesn't just slow you, it injects variance. Your median simple reaction time might slide from 200 to 220 milliseconds. But the real danger is lapses. Half-second stalls where nothing moves because a network blinked offline. The temporal binding window widens. Cues that normally fuse don't, and order judgments wobble. On the road, that shows up as 1 late break, followed by an overbreak to compensate. In code, a harmless log tone feels like a red alert because it landed off beat and you clicked the wrong thing. Fatigue isn't only sleep debt. Long sessions burn neuromodulators that maintain signal to noise. Late in a match or a shift, thresholds drift down, false starts creep up, and you chase ghosts. The fix isn't heroics, it's pacing. Work in blocks you can sustain, often 45 to 90 minutes, then reset with light, breath, and 60 seconds of beat discrimination to retune timing. If accuracy and hold purity sag, you're not just off, your gate loosened. Arousal rides a curve you can't ignore. Too low and evidence ramps crawl. Too high and noise crosses threshold. Caffeine helps in modest early doses. Vigilance rises, lapses shrink. Push it late and you rob sleep, paying with jitter tomorrow. Alcohol quietly widens the binding window and flattens your ability to set criteria. Confidence rises as thresholds fall, a bad combo. The honest rule, no just one, if decisions must land inside tight windows. Aging changes the hardware gradually. Conduction slows, myelin thins, dopamine tone shifts. Median reaction times lengthen a bit and variability rises. But strategy beats twitch. Older performers who stay sharp don't chase youth, they restructure. They prune choices, lean on chunked priors, raise contrast and font sizes to make onsets pop, extend alert durations past a saccade, and stack audio on critical states. That's engineering, not surrender. Neurology makes timing visible. In Parkinson's disease, basal ganglia dysfunction raises the cost of initiating movement. Ramps crawl, freezing reveals how delicate thresholds can be. External cues, metronomes, floor stripes often unlock motion because timing scaffolds the ramp. In multiple sclerosis, demyelination adds delay and inconsistency. On Tuesday, the path is different than on Friday. The play becomes pacing, simplified mappings, and ergonomic layouts that cut motor distance. After concussion, temporal order judgment degrades, light sensitivity spikes, and fatigue crushes thresholds. The hack is healing, graded return, quiet clocks, and professional care. No shortcut beats recovery. Medications move the gate. Stimulants may sharpen vigilance and trim lapses, but can drop thresholds into false starts if you don't raise your criteria. Beta blockers calm tremor and can help precision under stress but blunt arousal. Domain-specific, medical decisions only. Sedatives widen the window and slow saccades. Single-frame alerts disappear more often. If a new script makes your now feel stretched or slippery, redesign the environment. Longer pulses, brighter anchors, redundant audio, rather than muscling through. Circadian troughs are predictable traps. Early afternoon and pre-dawn stretch latencies and raise misses. Schedule high-tempo tasks when you're sharp. If you must perform in a trough scaffold, brighter light, shorter bouts, explicit if-then policies, and stronger redundancy. Audio plus visual with fast onsets and durations over 100 milliseconds. Don't let pride pick your hour. Let physiology. Environment can amplify slop or cushion it. Glare washes out magno edges, raise contrast, add shades, cheap LEDs flicker, swap for high-frequency drivers, loud spaces mask auditory onsets, shift critical tones to distinct frequencies, and add haptics. In VR or AR, small motion-to-photon delays tolerated fresh can nauseate you when fatigued. Lower graphics load to keep latency consistent. At home, widen aisles, add anti-slip mats, and group tools within one reach so you don't depend on last-second corrections when tired. Measurement keeps stories honest. Track 3 numbers daily: median reaction time, fastest decile, and false alarm rate. Log sleep, caffeine, stress, and meds. Patterns pop. On red flag days, short sleep, new drug, illness, raise thresholds, simplify mappings, and lean on anchors. Shift from fast to safe. Longer pulses, fewer branches, more redundancy. That shift is a skill. A micro story brings it close. A goalkeeper on 3 hours of sleep trained to widen flashes and trust audio. In the match, a stutter-stepping taker faked 2 tells. Old them would have guessed and gone early. New them held because the confirmed tone didn't land. The save came a beat later, clean. Another night, a resident with a mild concussion turned too soon. Monitors felt late. Saccades ate a warning, and a prep tone saved the catch. The lesson wasn't grit, it was design. You can't hack phototransduction, erase 30 to 80 milliseconds Saccadic suppression, or will axons to conduct faster. You can decide how to live inside those lags when biology wobbles. Clearer cues, longer durations, smarter schedules, simpler choices, honest logs. Superhuman, for you, includes knowing when to go early and when to make the world wait. Myth busting, what you can and can't hack. Let's strip the hype to the studs. Some delays are baked into the hardware. You can't speed phototransduction in rods and cones. You can't shortcut the 30 to 100 milliseconds it takes volleys to reach primary visual cortex. You can't erase the 30 to 80 millisecond blackout around saccades. Axonal conduction won't outrun its myelin. Those are constraints, not opinions. What moves is everything downstream of sensing. Decision architecture, attention, preparation, and environment. You can prune choices, so selection time shrinks. You can weight better priors, so extrapolation lands closer to truth. You can clean pipelines, so onsets hit sooner and with less smear. That's where the usable milliseconds live. Superhuman reactions aren't comic book. They're statistically exceptional for you. If your clean, simple reaction time centers near 200 milliseconds, nudging your fastest decile to 170, tightening variance, and launching choices inside the 80 to 200 millisecond temporal binding window will look unfair to others and feel calm to you. That's the target, not Twitch for its own sake. High refresh monitors and fast mice help, but they don't grant foresight. A 240 Hz display reduces frame quantization to about 4.2 milliseconds and preserves motion edges by cutting smear. Higher polling rates shave device quantization. Those gains only convert if your priors are right and your choices are pruned. Otherwise, you'll just make prettier, faster mistakes. Treat gear as a floor raiser, not a ceiling breaker. Audio alerts aren't magic, they're physics aligned. The auditory pathway preserves onset timing precisely and doesn't suffer saccadic suppression. Short, distinct tones with fast attacks can reach you when a one-frame visual flicker would vanish inside a 30 to 80 millisecond eye jump hole. Still, noise can mask tones. Redundancy wins. Pair brief audio with visual changes that last longer than a saccade and add haptics where hands or feet are on tools. Libet doesn't steal your agency. The readiness potential ramping 335 to 550 milliseconds before reported intention in self-paced moves shows that motor plans build before the story forms. In stimulus-driven tasks, it's the same drift at the threshold architecture, just faster. Your control shows up in policy, which branches you prime, which thresholds you set, what you veto. Preparation and criterion placement are the livers, not mystical free will toggles. Startle isn't a safe cheat code. A sudden loud sound can release a primed action via subcortical routes in roughly 80 to 120 milliseconds when the plan is truly loaded. That proves depth of preparation, not that you should rig air horns to force speed. In cars, shops, and operating rooms, maps startle to freeze or cancel, not go. Supplements won't rewrite temporal physics. Caffeine modestly improves vigilance and trims lapses when timed early. Mistime it, and you trade tonight's gains for tomorrow's jitter and sleep debt. Creatine can aid cognitive endurance in some contexts. Effects are subtle. Anything stronger is medical territory with trade-offs. No pill will shrink your anticipation window if your cues are sloppy and your thresholds are loose. Just react faster is terrible coaching. Lowering decision bounds without architecture floods you with false starts. Real speed is structural. Clearer priors, fewer branches, cleaner onsets, shorter motor paths, partial prep. That's why foil farms matter. Structured lures that punish premature commits and harden your criterion while you move the median earlier. Youth isn't destiny. Younger brains enjoy slightly faster conduction and crisper saccades. Older performers win by engineering. Chunked priors, explicit if then policies, high contrast anchors, longer alert durations, stacked audio, and smarter scan paths. They don't chase twitch, they reduce uncertainty. The 10,000 hour myth confuses volume with design. Gains come from brief targeted sessions with immediate feedback and spacing. 10 to 15 focus minutes that edge difficulty, track medians and false alarms, and rotate context beat marathons that train fatigue and timing slop. You can't erase error costs. Earlier commits always raise risk. You manage that with environment design, bigger targets, longer pulses, redundancy, plus drills that balance go fast days with hold clean days. In high penalty contexts, near a nerve, near a truck, bias attention to anchors, widen the window, and accept a later, safer call. Finally, sustainability is the quiet superpower. Sleep tightens thresholds. Honest logs expose drift. On red flag days, sleep debt, meds, illness, you raise bounds, simplify mappings, and lean on redundancy. Agency is choosing when to go early and when to make the world wait. Biology sets the lags. Design decides how you live inside them. A day lived faster, putting it all together. Wake before your phone. Sit up, sip water, and give your timing system a 1-minute primer. Set a metronome at 120 BPM. 10 taps, then 5 early/late calls at a 30 millisecond advance. 5 audio-visual order judgments at 70 milliseconds. You're not training hard, you're setting the gate. So onsets pop and the 80 to 200 millisecond binding window starts tight. Step to daylight. Anchor circadian alerting without a caffeine spike. 2 box breathing cycles to steady thresholds. Then 1 sharp inhale to tag readiness. Now load today's policies out loud. If X, then Y, linked to posture. If head dip plus oscillation snap, then hover brake. If footsteps accelerate and crosshair wobble quiets, then pre-fire 2. If plant shallow and hip closes, then dive left mid. Do 1 slow motion rep each, hinge the ankle over brake, set a loose forearm for flicks, stand spring loaded. You've collapsed choice before the day throws noise at you. At your desk, audit latency in 2 minutes. Lock a stable refresh you can hold. Smooth 120 beat stuttery, 144. Kill motion blur. Set variable refresh if it stabilizes frames. Bump contrast until edges pop. Don't crush blacks. Flip apps to raw input. Trim animations. Prefer full screen exclusive. Map short, distinct tones. 1 for act now, 1 for confirm, 1 for error. Keep fast attacks in brief durations so onsets stand out and don't mask the room. Group critical windows inside 1 foveal zone. That cuts long saccades where a 1-frame tail could vanish inside a 30 to 80 millisecond blind slice. Baseline fast. 20 simple taps. Note median, fastest decile, and any miss. It's a dashboard, not a grade. Remap clumsy shortcuts into a tight cluster. Shorten motor paths so the first millimeters are free, not a posture tax. Shoulders neutral, elbows near 90, forearm floating. Work in 45-minute blocks. Between blocks, do 10-beat deviation calls at a level you can hit at 80%. Then 1 long exhale to raise thresholds before a no-go heavy task. When you glance from code to chat, shift attention first, then move your eyes. That covert lead keeps saccadic suppression from eating micro-reactions you care about. Commute becomes lab. Seat and wheel set so braking is a hinge, not a slide. Scan with rhythm. Road center, mirrors, instruments, road. Before each jump, push attention first. Keep your collision chirp on. Short, distinct, fast onset. Build redundancy because a single brake flick 2 cars ahead might fall during a saccade you never feel. Note 3 micro wins. An early lift on a drift rhythm change, a clean hold on a lure brake, 1 long fixation to let detail-rich channels finish instead of ping-ponging through blindness. Lunch is light, not heroics. 10 minutes of sun, water, and a tiny foil farm. 3 penalty clips that fake your favorite tell but go nowhere. Reward the hold. 1 live rep, ranked round, simulated follow distance, or a buddy's penalty. Then stop. Log outcome, confidence, and whether you were early, on time, or late. The afternoon dips, scaffold it. Brighten your space, shorten bouts, make policies explicit. If you must ship something time critical, stack redundancy. Longer visual pulses, brief audio, maybe a soft haptic. If variance climbs, more backspaces, indecision. Switch to low tempo work. Prep, layout, documentation. Don't let pride pick your hour, let physiology. Training block lands before dinner. 15 minutes interleaved. 5 minutes at 75% speed to annotate cue onset. 5 at 90%. 5 at 100%, plus a pinch of overspeed. Immediate feedback inside 300 milliseconds, error cap around 15%. Every third rep, describe the cues, hip, plant, tempo. Every 10th, hunt the foil that looks right, but breaks one rule. Track median decision lead, accuracy, false alarm rate, and drift. If false alarms rise, widen the window and add short holds as penalties. Finish with 2 clean, normal speed reps to lock feel. Evening is for recovery by design. Screens dim, no late caffeine, 1 minute of offbeat taps to bleed jitter. A hot shower to set up a drop in body temperature. Log 60 seconds. Median RT, fastest decile, false alarms, sleep plan. Note 1 environment tweak. Move a speed widget. Change an alert tone. Cluster 2 tools. Watch the micro stories stack. In the kitchen, a thin sheen glints. Your stride shortens before your foot hits. Head dip plus oscillation snap became hover brake. Translated to legs on tile. On stairs, a strap lies across the landing. Your first fixation lands on glare, not color, and your foot lifts higher. In a pickup game, a shoulder points near post. Your hand moves before contact, and it doesn't feel early. It feels inevitable. None of this rewrites phototransduction or erases saccadic suppression. It edits your day around them. You've pulled critical cues inside the 80 to 200 millisecond gate. Loaded branches you're willing to launch, cleaned inputs so onsets arrive crisp, and kept the body ready without leaking. Some days you'll widen windows and slow down because sleep, stress, or meds shifted thresholds. That choice is part of the skill. Tomorrow repeats with tiny deltas. A cleaner tone here, a shorter reach there, a tighter chunk on a stubborn tell. Agency accrues in milliseconds. People will call it instinct. You'll know it's architecture. Prediction trained, thresholds tuned, and a world arranged to meet you a little sooner than before. You live a few steps behind raw events, but trained forecasts and smart design let your moves land inside that hidden window where time feels real. Try this now. Run the 15-minute anticipation drill, log median and false alarms for a week, then share your deltas below. Subscribe for more true story science you can use, and watch the next